Welcome to the Wildlife Wire. I'm Mark Searles,
And I'm Samantha Miller.
and this is your source for wildlife news and the people that make it. On this week's episode, Trump's Earth Day present, endangered in New York, dire wolves and Pontiac Fieros, and colossal squid.
Okay, well, I think we could start recording then. Are we recording? We're recording.
We are recording.
Oh my God, Mark,
This is
what a time to be
podcast.
alive. I'm on a podcast right
You're on a
now.
pod right now. This is a podcast.
Wow, what a treat. I am
It's like
thrilled
the
to be here.
radio, but it goes anytime you can hear it.
Exactly. Yeah, like that. Long format. So how are you? How are things?
Doing well. Yesterday it was 75 and I was digging holes for a new fence, and now it's 30 and snowing. So I love it.
Uh, yeah, it is 30 and snowing up here in the Rockies too. So we are just doing what Colorado does best in spring, that fun roller coaster ride of it's warm. No, never mind. It's warm again. No, it's a blizzard. So
I like it.
I
I,
kind
I,
of
I
like it.
like that winter is like, yeah, I know. Listen, guys, I know I'm done. I know,
Yeah,
but I'm not quite done. All right. I'm
yeah,
I'm hanging in there.
yeah, it's back. So anyway, speaking of things that are back, are you ready for my
Yeah,
news
let's
story?
dive into probably why you're not so happy today.
I'm having a day for a couple of reasons, but one of them is someone who is also back that we can't get rid of, that seems to be here for a while now. And that is our favorite president, our dear President Trump,
Hmm.
is rumored to grant the Earth a gift on Earth Day. You want to know what that gift is, Mark?
Is it a Big Mac?
No. Brazilian cows always make sense, though, when you're trying to honor the Earth. But not a Big Mac. This gift is he is looking at removing tax exemptions from environmental nonprofits that have challenged his administration or are strong supporters in the fight against climate change. So the rumors have been a swirling. There are news articles all over the place saying that these are pretty legitimate rumors and legitimate concerns. Ironically, I feel like it's really interesting to think about it from this angle of conservative politics is that conservatives argue we've got to privatize everything. And in order to take care of others, we don't need the government to do that. We can do that through local nonprofits or by donations, and people will take care of each other that way or take care of causes they care about that way. And, I'm here to say that old conservatism is dead. And so will our planet be soon. Um,
And on that note, thank you for listening, everyone.
I'm sorry. I laugh because it's so absurd. I never thought, and I guess there could be worse coming. I'm tired of saying I never thought I'd live in a world where, but we do live in a world where um, our institutions are under attack, and that's on every level. We saw attacks launched at Harvard University, and we will soon see attacks launched at the very types of nonprofits that you and I have committed our careers to. And I am absolutely disgusted. I'm floored. I think that we should be able to disagree on politics without attacking nonprofit groups that are all working towards causes they believe in.
Yeah, yeah, it's right out of authoritarianism 101, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like I was slow on the authoritarian train. Like I was like, maybe I'm gonna get on. I don't know. Is it leaving the station yet? I'm not
You don't
sure.
have a choice.
And then I realized, oh my God, I don't have a choice on the authoritarian train. They push you on there. And Trump will come for everything you love, regardless of whether you're on the train or not. The train's leaving the station. So and I just really want to flag that for our listeners. There will surely be ways that we can engage in nonviolent resistance in the future, and we need to stay organized. We need to be prepared. And I remain forever hopeful that the people of this country will do the right thing despite having I don't know, like a fascist coded president right now, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, it's scary. Even the longtime senator out of Alaska was at a town hall, and she was like, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I don't know how to react. I don't know what to do without losing my job and then not being able to do anything, where she has a lot of power right now. So yeah, it's really, really sad.
It's crazy times we live in, and for someone that's, you and I have slightly different political views probably on some things and other things. But as someone that's registered as an unaffiliated voter, many Coloradans are, we are up for the grabs by either party. Neither is appealing right now, Mark. I want everyone to do better. Like that is what I want, and I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it.
Good. Do better.
Okay. Well,
Right.
you
Can
want
we?
I don't know. I've got somewhere that's doing better, I guess, if you want to talk about that on my negative Nancy train.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's move on up. Where are we going?
We're moving a little up, and we are moving up to Albany, New York.
Not to be
And
confused with a city that has the same spelling in Georgia, but is pronounced Albany.
ooh, okay, I can't even say that.
Albany.
Albany. Okay. Thanks. Thank you. I'm glad that you could represent your Georgia roots right now. But no, we are going to New York, big city. And in New York has its own Endangered Species Act, its own version of that for the state. And so New York has added the Atlantic coast leopard frog, the eastern fence lizard, and the eastern tiger salamander to its protected, threatened, and endangered species lists. And so the state's Department of Environmental Conservation, though, they still made a few poor choices, and they did not include some other species that should have been included, like the hellbender, the American eel, and the American shad. So those were not included, and they don't get a better shot at survival, but the first three do. And I'm really glad for that. So there's my little ray of hope. I found it as little and it's in the form of little animals in New York State. And I'm excited to see the state do the right thing by half the species that we hoped would get protection. So I'm a glass half full kind of gal right now, maybe. So
Good.
here we are.
I wish the Hellbender had protections as well. Do you know what they look like?
I do. They're really cool.
Yeah. They're like kind of dinosaur-esque and
Yes.
huge.
And massive, very crazy looking. They're salamanders, not salmonoids, salamanders of
Indeed.
types, right?
Yep. Yeah, and the
I
tiger salamanders are really cool too. And they're big for a salamander, but nothing like a hellbender.
Yeah, a hellbender's huge. And I've seen in Oregon, they have these really cool little salamanders that live up in the Willamette Valley that are bright orange, and I need to know what those are. So I
Interesting.
will.
On the East Coast, there are orange salamanders. They can be orange or they can be kind of yellowish green, translucent a bit. The
Yeah.
Eastern newt.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Um,
Google my salamander now for our listeners so they get to know exactly which salamander I'm talking about because it is beautiful.
yeah, I love all those. I had a little terrarium when I was a kid and it had salamanders and frogs, and my mom and I would watch them eat guppies.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
these these are um ins okay. Don't laugh. I'm not pronouncing things correctly today. Insatina salamanders. There's those. And then there are also newts in Oregon, rough-skinned newts. And I think mine was a rough-skinned newt.
Very cool.
Yeah, you want to see him? Look how cute he is. Look at
Oh
He's
my
got a little
goodness.
cute newt face.
Yeah. Lot
Okay.
lot better than Newt Gingrich.
Tell me more. Are we talking about Newt Gingrich now?
No,
Or
no, we're all done with. I think we're done with politics.
all right.
That's really encouraging to hear about New York and their enlisting of more species. It's encouraging and discouraging, right? I mean, it's both. It's
Remember,
good that
glass half
they're
full.
it's good that they're providing protections, but it's sad that they need protections to begin with.
You know what other type of protections I'm hearing exist out there?
What's up?
Patented protections? Is that
Patented. Well,
patented?
so there is that story. So I'm not going to. That's not my main story,
Oh, okay.
but
Sorry.
it
Go
is.
ahead.
So they are both colossal stories.
They are stories
Yeah.
of epic
So
proportions.
there's one that Colossal. Maybe we'll throw in the show notes, but Colossal is patenting their the animals that they are getting the DNA from to do these projects, whether it's a woolly mammoth or the dire wolf or whatnot. So they'll own it. And what's really interesting about that is they are then no longer wild animals. They fall under commerce.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I this is a development that I hadn't even thought about, that they would patent these animals. And so yeah, so it's really interesting that they are patenting these animals, and we'll see what the patent offices say about it, and if they, most likely they would pull back some of the things they're going for in uh these submissions to get the patents. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about with Colossal was the Canid Specialist Group through the IUCN. They are the world's chief body of scientific and practical expertise on the status and conservation of all extant canid species.
Wow, that's a very specialized niche. Do you want to talk more about it?
Yeah. So what they're saying is what we were saying before. Like, these aren't dire wolves. Is like they use such little uh, DNA from dire wolves that no one in their right mind that has any kind of expertise would ever confuse these. They look like dire wolves. So, I like cars. So
I do. I do.
I
Yes.
was
Go
thinking
ahead.
about this analogy.
Oh God.
So
Take me for a ride. Let's hear.
do you remember in the 1980s the Pontiac Fiero?
No, I
So
don't
it was
remember that, but go ahead.
this little thing, and people would put body kits on it to look like a Ferrari.
Ooh, I have heard of Corvette kits. So
Yeah,
continue.
same kind of thing.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it may look like a Ferrari, but that's it. The,
Mhm.
the engine is not a Ferrari, the interior is not, the suspension is not, nothing else. It just resembles a Ferrari.
Right.
That's what we're dealing with these dire wolves. When to take the car analogy
Oh
further,
God. Okay.
when
Ready?
they produce something that is a Chevrolet Suburban that is very, very similar to a Cadillac Escalade,
Oh,
now we can start talking, okay, like a lot of the pieces are the same. It's the same platform, it's the same engine, it's the same suspension. That's what we're dealing with, right?
but
But
all in a
we're
very ethical gray area of a living animal.
Yes, but what I was trying to think about, like, how do you make an analogy around this? And so right now, all we're dealing with is a wolf with a body kit.
I could. I'm glad you wrapped that up for us.
Yeah.
Hot take. I
Hot take,
appreciate it.
hot take. Colossals, dire wolves are Pontiac Fieros trying to be a Ferrari. Nothing against wolves. That gray
Uh-huh.
wolves are beautiful, wonderful
Okay.
animals. I apologize for making them sound like Pontiac Fieros.
Yeah. Well, you've now taken gray wolves and just equated them with machinery. So good for you.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
did it.
So you can write into Samantha Miller.
No, Samantha Miller is not equating gray wolves to Pontiacs. So, uh,
So
yeah,
all I'm
that's
saying is
fascinating.
a lot of the because it's millions of pieces of DNA that
Yeah,
create an animal, and they're using a handful to call it a dire wolf, and it's absurd. And the
and those kits
scientists that know best are calling it absurd.
and the kits are patented, though. The word
Yeah,
we can't say, patented.
patented,
And
patent.
so we can have not Jurassic Park, would it be Pleistocene Park?
Yeah,
Yeah, there
nice
you
work.
go.
Nice work.
You're welcome. Dan Flores
You
taught me that
pronounced
word.
it correctly as
That
well.
word I can say, apparently.
So so we've been talking colossal.
Okay.
Let's talk cool colossal. It's real 100% authentic animals.
Okay.
This is the Palo Alto scientist just caught a colossal squid on camera.
Ooh, how big is it?
Tiny.
Oh, it's tiny?
It's a
I was not
baby.
expecting that. Tell me more.
It's a baby, but it was about 2,000 feet under the South Atlantic Sea near the Sandwich Islands, which is if you go to the tip of South America and then go east
Mm-hmm.
into the Atlantic Ocean, that's where these islands are. And so it was 2,000 feet deep, and this one was only about a foot long, but they grow to be 23 feet long.
Ooh, do
Yeah.
tell. So that it has colossal potential, is what you're saying.
Yes.
I
It
got
has
it.
colossal energy.
Got it. Got it. But it's a baby, just
Yeah.
living in its little squid land.
So the way that they know that this is in fact a colossal squid, even though it's a baby, is that it has these hooks on its legs. So it has 8 legs like an octopus.
Uh-huh.
And that's what distinguishes it from other small squid. But the video, I encourage everyone to check out the show notes on it because it's gorgeously shot in the pitch black. And but its body is transparent but can turn translucent, and like you can see its eyes glowing, like really bright orange eyes. A super cool animal, and it has no idea that the death of America is happening right now.
Good. That's good. It doesn't know the world is dying, neither do the wolves. So,
Yeah.
here we are. I have a question.
Yeah.
Would you rather, or you can say neither, would you rather go on a deep sea submarine expedition to see animals like that little squid or like the
Or
lanternfish
or space.
or space?
I listened to an episode of Star Talk that had this question.
I have no idea what Star Talk is. It sounds incredibly
Neil
nerdy.
deGrasse Tyson.
Not. I mean, our show is nerdy, but this sounds like a new level. I'm ready.
Yeah, I am not prepared to make that decision right now,
Okay. Okay.
but probably space.
Okay.
What about
That
you?
was an interesting choice. I'd go deep sea. I don't trust space. Elon Musk is up there too much.
This is a really good segue. You know why, though? It's because while our guest hasn't gone to space or deep
Ooh,
down, he has studied water columns in the
that's true.
ocean and has traveled the entire globe.
That's also true. Yes.
So, I mean, I guess the next step we need to ask him, is he going to space?
Oh, that would be a smart question.
Right. Well, we have a very special guest today. His name's Max Seigal. He is a biologist and acclaimed photographer. And there's a couple of different ways we like to do interviews here on the Wildlife Wires. One, sometimes it's topical, maybe about a specific animal. And then the other way is to hear the life story of folks and how they've navigated through a professional career that, in Max's case, has spanned continents and working with different species from around the globe. And Max has been the Nat Geo drone photographer. He won the Drone Photography Award, as well as a second place Nat Geo Traveler Photo Contest Award. and as well as numerous other awards from distinguished organizations around the world. And when Max isn't on assignment, he's often paragliding or mountain biking or basically doing anything to keep him from growing up. So we find Max today, and he's in Boulder, Colorado, where he grew up. And since he grew up, and he certainly has spanned the globe. So welcome, Max.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Yeah, we're glad to have you, Max. And it's been really nice in our pre-banter to have someone help me team up against Mark. So it's great having you here. We appreciate you. And beyond photography, you are an expedition leader too. So you do all of the adventurous things. Am I right?
That's right. Yep. I've been guiding trips for almost 15 years now around the world. Started out in Southeast Asia and kind of expanded from there to Alaska, the Arctic, the Antarctic, and pretty much everything in between.
Amazing.
So how does one get into that kind of work, Max? Tell us your long winding road, as we like to hear on the Wildlife Wire, of a young kid just in Boulder, looking around, thinking the world's amazing. Where do you go from there?
It's funny when Mark introduced me, he said I was an acclaimed photographer. I thought he meant I was claiming I was a photographer, but then he went on to say that I won these awards, and I was like,
Oh
oh, I
yeah,
guess that makes more sense.
that's typical
So
Mark.
I know. I was like, claimed
We
photographer.
all claim to be photographers.
Exactly. I was like, I'm just one of the bunch. But yeah, winning awards definitely helps. It boosts that career a bit. Of course, having a background in science is really useful. A lot of these jobs that I do as a guide, it involves natural history and education. So teaching about the wildlife, about what we're encountering in these wild places that we visit, alongside all the other responsibilities like being able to drive zodiacs and ice and teach photography and guide people just in, different terrain. So it's kind of a diverse job, but if you have a background in science and also maybe something else, like if you wanted to be a kayak guide, if you had kayak guiding, there's different avenues to do it. But I think science is a really useful background for that type of career.
Absolutely. And so with that background in science, you studied in the Bahamas. Is that correct? Bahamas and Costa Rica?
I did, yeah. I did a semester program at a school called the Island School in the Bahamas. That was really cool. It was during high school. It was like a marine biology intensive program. So it really inspired me to get more involved in ecology and science and conservation. We were doing research on aquaculture at the time. So it just kind of catapulted my, I guess, career in the sciences, but also my education in the science.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about the aquaculture studies. I've seen so many different forms of aquaculture, some of it sustainable, some of it not so much. What were you looking into? And also, can you tell folks what aquaculture is in case folks aren't
Yeah.
aware?
Yeah. So aquaculture, it's essentially farming of marine organisms. So if you think of like a cattle farm on land, basically once you take that and put it in the water with fish or anything, could be crustaceans or lobsters or whatever. Once you're farming marine organisms, that is now aquaculture. And there's a lot of issues that we encounter in terms of like environmental impact. First of all, you've got all these inputs of food and whatever else is going into the cages at the time when you're trying to like feed all the animals or potentially give them pesticides or anything like that. Now you have a big influx of potential chemicals, and so you need to have a place that has a lot of water flow, maybe tidal flow. That way it's carrying the nutrients in and out instead of like it just being stagnant and sitting there and causing a big problem. So there's a whole bunch of things that go on with aquaculture, and our research in the Bahamas at that time was to look at different types of food for the fish because a lot of these fish are obviously wild animals and eat other fish and other sea creatures. And so to find sustainable food sources is a really challenging thing. And also monitoring the water quality near the cage. And then we had control sites that were, a couple miles away, and we would take samples to see if like there's any algae blooms going on near the cages or any kind of human impacts or greater impacts from the aquaculture itself. So yeah, just kind of looking at the environmental impacts of it all.
We have some overlapping background, and I'm going to use aquaculture as a transition. And so I was in the Peace Corps in Zambia, and I was a rural aquaculture promotion agent. And so we worked with the Zambian Department of Fisheries and helped people establish fish ponds. It was tilapia, which is a native fish there. And so I spent 3 years in Zambia, 2 years working on that. But I bring that up because you also spent time in Africa, and I wanted to get into that. One, what did you do? And then the second is, well, how did you get there? How did you make that happen for yourself?
So right after school, I graduated with degrees in environmental science and zoology, and um, kind of just wanted to explore the world. I started looking at job opportunities, and I would sort them based on location and then based on title. And I was just trying to like explore. And there was this conservation program. It was called the Nayati Conservation Corps, and it was in South Africa. And I applied for it. I think they had like 6 positions available. And again, it was like just after graduating and ended up getting one of those spots. And so I went out to a farm, like a game farm in South Africa. And while I was there, it was only supposed to be a couple of months. I ended up just reaching out to professors and universities and grad students and sending them just like cold emails being like, hey, I just graduated with degrees in science and like I'm really interested in just doing field work. Does anyone need like an extra hand on a project or, anything really, just volunteering? And I was surprised at how many people responded with like, "Oh yeah, I've got this project and I need someone to come help me like tag wild cats or like go look for wild dogs or like go on a boat and do plankton surveys." So I ended up just making all these crazy connections without really knowing where it would lead me, and jumped on maybe like 5 or 6 different research projects just as a research assistant out there, and had the time of my life. It was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get into a little bit of your work there, but first, so when you were doing these different projects, were those paid positions? Were they volunteer
All
work?
volunteer. Yeah.
And so what do they cover your room and
Yeah.
board?
Most of them would just say like, "Hey, we'll get you a ride here," because it was all over the place. Some of them ocean, some of them land based, and they would just say, "We'll get you a ride. We'll cover your housing and your food, and just show up." And so I would just like bounce around.
That's amazing. I mean, that that's such I think when people uh think about working abroad, they often create these hurdles in their brains of saying, "Oh, well, I'm not going to make enough money. I don't have connections. I don't do." And this little nugget here is just this little nugget of not Max, you're a nugget,
Is Max a little nugget
but this
in this
nugget of
scenario?
I'm a pretty big nugget, but
but this nugget of information of saying, yeah, no one is born with all the ways to do things, but cold calling and just putting yourself out there and getting work that maybe you're is volunteer work, but at least you're not going to starve and you have a place to stay. Like that's the most important part, right? And you get to do things and be involved with things that many people would pay thousands of dollars to do. And so it's just really inspirational to hear that. But Sam, I know you had a question, and I wanted to go back to on some of the work he did in South Africa and what that looked like.
Yeah, no, I had a comment first. My comment was I feel like I would be taken in that scenario. I would somehow get there, and then the people that said they'd give me a job would be the people that take me. So these are things I think about. And again, just from a female lens, it's probably a little more tricky to navigate those kind of waters by yourself in a different country, but it's inspiring nonetheless. So to ease my fears, or maybe to add to them, what's the diciest situation you got into as a volunteer in Africa, and how did you get out of that? And that can be with people and or animals.
Oh man, there's a lot of scenarios running through my head right now. That was a pretty wild year. Um, I guess the taken comment really reminds me of a story of so like I said, I was only planning on staying for 3 months. So when you come into the country, they give you a visa for 3 months. And then I got this job or like a volunteer position on a boat as a researcher, and it was a month-long boat. But I'd already been in the country for 3 months, and I was working on this super rural farm, studying these black-footed cats, which is the smallest species of cat in South Africa. And it was a farm owned by De Beers, like a diamond company, and they only allowed access for like researchers to come. So it was way in the middle of nowhere. Just to walk to like a road with cars, you had to walk along this dirt road for like 2 hours to get to a road with cars on it because it was that far. Anyways, I was freaking out because my visa was going to expire. And I was like, this was back in 2010 when there was this thing called the visa run. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but you used to be able to do this thing where you could actually like jump across the border of a country and then come right back in like 10 minutes later and you would just get a new stamp for a visa. They like a lot of countries kind of caught on and started disallowing this, but this was like right at that verge of like visa runs were just starting to become popular and people were catching on and sort of not doing it. But it was kind of my only option because I had this boat trip and I was like, I gotta go to this boat. It's gonna be cool. It's another month. And so I ended up hitchhiking to this country called Lesotho, which is this tiny little country inside of South Africa. It's like a little bubble of a country and it's really cool. But I was like 6 hours away and I had to walk 2 hours on the road. Then I hitchhiked on like a tiny minivan to a bigger bus. And all the while, I was just like, kind of, I didn't feel very unsafe, but I never felt like totally safe. But long story short, I crossed the border, came back. They rejected me, didn't get the visa. Then I had
Oh,
six
no.
hours to go on the way back. And this time it was getting dark. And I was like, this is where it got a little spooky because now I was getting picked up by like random cars in the middle of the night as a white American hitchhiker, and I was definitely spooked. And some of the people, I didn't know exactly what their intentions were, but luckily everyone was super friendly and kind and like took me where I needed to go and it all worked out. But man, I was a little scared at that moment. So
But you made it through, and it reminds me, I did hitchhike through Guatemala once and ended up with a guy doing a run to collect hubcaps all around
oh,
town before I finally got to the hostel I was hoping to stay in. But no, I was a joint hubcap collector and made it safely. So it's always good to hear. Some of these things can get a little dodgy, but you get out of them, and that's great to hear. Go ahead, Mark. I know you had a follow-up
Yeah.
question.
Well, now I'm kind of disappointed that you didn't follow your hubcap dreams, but
Really sad. I tried.
maybe one day you can get back there. But yeah, so for folks that haven't traveled abroad to countries like this, like South Africa or Guatemala, or and while I was in Zambia, I mean, hitchhiking was the way you traveled. Oftentimes, I've ridden in the back of trucks. I've ridden on a in an enclosed truck where it was halfway full of pineapples, and so I made a little pineapple chair there with a friend of mine. But so hitchhiking is pretty normal for not just travelers, but for folks that live in these countries, and so it's you're bringing back, you're flooding my brain with lots of memories of fun adventures while in Africa. And so you went on a boat. You're on a boat, and you're in a boat for a month. What were you doing on that boat?
oh man, that was another nerve-wracking experience because I'd never been on a boat before.
Oh no.
And literally we get on the boat and it pulls out and we weren't even gonna go back to shore for a month and I got this like panic attack because I don't know, I just like all of a sudden the world is moving, you're like trying to keep your balance. I had never been on a boat and I was just like, what am I doing? And I freaked out. Um I ended up getting, this might be too much information for your listeners, but super constipated and like I was just like for 5 days, no movements, and I was freaking out. And I talked to the captain. I was like, "What do I do?" And he was like, "Drink a gallon of seawater."
Oh
And
no.
I didn't really want to, but he had X-Lax, and then I took a pill, and it was crazy what happened next. But anyways, okay. What was I doing? But
That's a different podcast.
yeah. Okay.
What happens next? We'll save for a different day. We don't know, but I'm glad he had X-Lax, so no seawater. Continue.
That was fortunate. The actual reason I was on the boat was that was a different project. It was with Rhodes University, and they were looking at different water samples throughout different water columns. So they had this device that they would drop in the ocean called a CTD, and it had all these tanks on it. And then every, let's say, 20 feet or so, it would open up a valve and collect a water sample. And then the next 20 feet, it would do the same. And that way, throughout, let's say, like 200 feet of water, you could see what the salinity is, what the water temperature is, what all these different variables are. And we could also we did these plankton tows. So we had this big net that we would tow and take a look at what kind of plankton we were looking at. So my role again was just like as a assistant. I wasn't really like analyzing data or anything. So I got to do kind of all the fun stuff, which is like the dirty work where you get to go out and like collect the samples and just send all the stuff that we were collecting off to the researchers. So that's kind of what we were doing.
That's so cool. There are two different types of scientists, right? There's the ones out there and then the ones analyzing. Do you have any dreams of being the ones analyzing, or are you like
Never.
Never. I
Who
didn't
wants
think
to
so.
do that?
I didn't think so.
Some people do, and I'm always like, I admire them. Like now I'm in photography and video, and I knew this guy that all he wanted to do was edit videos on his computer. And I admired that. But like I'm the kind of guy that just wants to shoot and then hand it over and somebody else does all the computer work. So same thing with field work. It's so much more fun to just be out there for me.
Yeah, yeah, and so you bring up photography, and that there is something to be said though on the editing piece, right? When you look at a movie, the movie is made by the editor, right? So the director had a vision, but at the end of the day, the editor put it together in a storyline. So each part has its place and value, and it certainly takes different personality types and skill sets. Sam?
Oh, no. I was just going to say it reminds me of a time that I was a bridesmaid on the show Bridezillas, and they edited us so nicely to tell that whole story of the terrible bride. But I'd like to get back to your story, Max, and don't look that up, Mark. I saw you looking at me like you're going to try to find the old Bridezillas episode where I was in a hot pink bridesmaid dress in the early aughts. It was great. So, Max, we kind of jumped to you're a photographer now. What was that transition from science to photography, and how did you make it?
I don't think it was ever really a transition. It kind of just like seamlessly they incorporated into each other in a lot of ways because as a researcher, I was always going to these amazing places, beautiful spots, remote areas that a lot of times were really hard to get access to. And so obviously you're out there in the field for a lot of the day, and I would just bring a camera with me. And so it kind of kickstarted my career into photography by just doing all these fieldwork jobs and being out and, looking at different creatures that like most people would never see in their life, but we were like studying them. And so I could do really cool photography work with a lot of different animals that are really hard to have access to.
And so you're never going to take a picture if you're not there. And so if you have that job that allows you to be there, then you should have a camera. And the best picture is always taken with the camera that you have on hand. So you're on a boat, you can't poop. You get off that boat, you're probably pooping again normally. And
maybe we don't know yet.
We don't know.
We don't know how well the issue's resolved
I
itself.
got some more stories for you.
What are you doing? What are you doing next when you get back to terra firma?
Well, I was gonna say this brings me to a tangent of a dung beetle research project that I did, but that was
Perfect.
actually prior.
We've been talking about this poop just to get you to talk about the dung beetle.
This was not after the boat. This was a couple of years earlier. I did this class in college, and it was a field work class where we actually created a project, and then the class we went to Costa Rica, and every student would actually do that project that they proposed, and the whole point of it was to like design a research paper, do the abstract, and do the research and the conclusions, and like go through the whole process of what it was to like basically do science. And it was really funny because I had a bunch of colleagues, or I guess other students, who were looking at really serious stuff like birds and the trees and different diversity and like ants that were living in acacia trees and these mutual relationships. And I took this project to like looking at different dung beetle populations because I was like, that sounds really fun. And my project was quite simple. You basically poop in a cup and then you put the cup in the forest and then you just see what kind of dung beetles showed up. And what I didn't factor was that like with the dietary change of being in a new country throughout the week, your stool changed consistency, and that really impacted the results because, well, I don't know how
Not all of the results were
it
impacted.
went from solid to liquid. They were crawling and now they're swimming. It was just a whole different ball game, but
The dung beetles were a forerunner to your African boatsmanship. This is great.
But that's
the part that
'cause-
you edit out of the file.
No, we're gonna leave
Yeah,
it.
this is good stuff. But that's fascinating. I never would have thought that dung beetles had any interest in human poop. I was just assuming that it was elephants that they were
I think
after.
it's all
but
poop.
That's
Yeah,
Well, it
all
was
forms of
actually
all
it
forms
was
of dung.
a good research project because dung beetles actually play a really important role in the environment, right? They're like big decomposers and spread out a bunch of nutrients that's obviously like, I guess, packed into one spot. They like roll it around and spread seeds. And I was looking at like different forests, so like primary succession versus like places that were deforested versus like old growth forests, to see kind of how the population of dung beetles were in these different levels of forest and how that impacted like the future of nutrient dispersals and all this kind of stuff. So it was actually a really cool project, but um, the methods got complicated.
Well, and there's all these little, I mean, you say the dung beetles weren't serious, but there's so many little species that make up our big ecosystems. And sometimes we all focus on our charismatic megafauna, right? Where
Yeah.
everyone wants to talk about an African lion, but we don't really talk about the role of a dung beetle, how important that is to the environment. So I personally am thankful that we were able to talk about poop before I ask you inevitable megafauna questions that are more in my wheelhouse.
Okay.
All right, I will lay it on you. So now you are on expeditions. You've now parlayed both your work as a photographer and your scientific research into a career where you're an expedition leader for different organizations. What are you doing as an expedition leader? Are you paragliding into a boat and then doing a science project with a bunch of senior citizens, then, jumping out of the boat and scuba diving your way back to shore? What does one do as an expedition leader?
Well, unfortunately, jumping off the boat is forbidden, but I have done some paragliding where you land next to the boat, but that was kind of free time opportunity. And in fact, that is the cool part about this job is you go to these really amazing places around the world. And let's say you have an afternoon off or something, you can kind of just go do your thing. So there's great spots in Alaska where like you could just hike up a mountain that's right next to the boat and then just fly down from the top and like land next to the boat and get back on and go to lunch and then go. But as far as what we're really doing, it's kind of a mix of, well, it's all tourism. So people come on these vacations, right? And we try to incorporate an element of like conservation and education into that. So it's obviously more than just like looking at pretty things. We're also teaching a lot about what you're looking at. We're teaching about the wildlife, about the ecosystems, the biology of the place, the megafauna that we see, even like we talked about all the small organisms like krill and how those play an important role. And so we have lectures, we have guest speakers, we bring on experts. Usually we have specific people in different roles. So like an ornithologist to talk about the birds and mammal experts to talk about the whales. And so everybody has a niche and they're really, really fascinating trips because they're educational. You learn a lot, you see a lot, you go to these cool places, and everybody's really excited to be there because you're on vacation, but you're also incorporating a little bit of conservation stuff in there as well. Sometimes we'll actually do citizen science projects where we'll try to contribute to science with the guests on board. There's this thing called Happy Whale, which is like if you take a picture of a whale tail, you can submit it to the website Happy Whale, and every humpback whale has a different tail. It's like a fingerprint, and you can actually identify the individual whale. And throughout, obviously, if it was just researchers taking pictures, you'd have very like select pictures to work with. But the second you incorporate tourism, now you have thousands and thousands of people that are submitting images, and you can get really good data about like where the whales are traveling to, their paths and routes and migrations and all these cool things, their parents, their kids. Like you can actually see generational trends. You can see when they're like off course, and like a whale that usually goes to Brazil is now in South Africa. It's really cool just to like get that kind of data. And we do a number of different projects, not just the Happy Whale project, but cloud surveys and bird surveys. So we are doing a little bit of citizen science too, which is a really fun component of these trips. But yeah, they're wild. They're super fun.
So on the whale surveys, is that something that y'all prompt the tourists when they're on the boat, say, hey, take these, if you get a shot of the whale tail, we need to you just submit it here, or how does that work?
Yeah, so early on in the trip, every trip we'll do like a mini lecture on what the citizen science opportunities are. So we'll be like just introducing them. We'll say like, hey, whales have these individual flukes, like you can identify them if you get a good picture, or we encourage you to take photos of them. And if you get a good picture, usually we actually have a citizen science coordinator on the boat. So we say you can just submit them straight to the person and they'll submit them for you, or you can create your own account and submit them that way. So we give them like all the info and we kind of run them through it early on in the trip. So that way it's in their head and they've kind of got that seed planted.
Yeah. And I think you don't, for folks that can't afford to go on these types of expeditions, there's lots of ways to plug in and do citizen science projects closer to home, right?
Totally. Yeah. And a lot of these projects are things that people can do back home, like the bird survey stuff, like even eBird, like recording what birds are in your backyard, because a lot of that data just helps. Like, I know there's a lot of really, we call them bird nerds, like the people that are really into birds, and like a vagrant bird will show up somewhere where it's not supposed to be, and people will drive like 10 hours to go see it. And,
A vagrant bird.
that's just, it's like recorded because somebody saw it in their backyard and they, submitted it to eBird, but all kinds of cool stuff you can do.
So are vagrant birds, are they setting up housing where they shouldn't be, or is that a scientific term? what makes a bird a vagrant?
A lot of times it's a storm. Like, let's say you have a huge storm with a lot of wind, it'll blow a bird off course, like that maybe was heading a certain direction, moving south or moving north. And sometimes, like a hurricane, you'll get birds from like North America that show up in Africa or something, like some big, big storm event. And so, yeah, oftentimes that's how it happens.
Yeah, and I would imagine with climate change now that probably happens a little more often. But yes, I love Merlin for bird identification and then to contribute to Cornell's research. And then iNaturalist has that really cool thing where you can identify mammals or bugs or plants. And I like taking that out with me and taking pictures and then running them later. But it does mean you have to have your phone with you, which is the one bummer, which I don't like necessarily when I'm in the backcountry. So we are, we're heading towards the end, Mark. So I want to make sure if you have any last questions, you start thinking about them now, because I have an important question, which I'm obviously going to ask next. And then you might have a chance to go after me.
Are you saying that I don't have important questions?
Maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not sure. We're going to let you think about it. But can I ask mine though? It's not a closing question.
Please.
I just want to ask, we talk about humpbacks, we've talked about dung beetles. What has been an animal encounter that's really stuck with you, that has really imprinted itself on your memory and maybe changed the way you looked at animals?
I feel like I've had a lot of those, obviously, throughout my career, just being with animals. But I think early on, like if we were going back, college, I never really got it with birds. I was like, why are people so obsessed with birds? I just couldn't figure it out. My best friend in college was in ornithology. That was like her study. And then I remember I was just like walking back to the community center one afternoon, and there was a red-tailed hawk just in the tree, but like eye level with me and like probably 10 feet away from me. And I just like looked up and saw it and just totally stopped and froze. And then we just kind of stood there and looked at each other for like a good minute. And it was the sort of like a magical moment for me where I was like, this is really cool. And like birds are cool. And I just kind of like fell in love with just like this majestic creature that was like right in front of me that can like fly in the sky. And yet here we were just like staring at each other. And that was like the moment it shifted for me from being like, I'm not really interested in birds to all of a sudden I was like, not necessarily bird nerd level, but I
Uh,
definitely got into birds. And so,
so the
yeah.
bird nerd was self-deprecating humor. I'm
Yeah,
getting it now. Yes,
there you
because
go.
I personally identify as a bird nerd, and I am glad to hear that you weren't making fun of me. We were laughing together
We
about being
are. We're
nerds.
in this journey together.
I'm Mark Searles, and I'm also a bird nerd.
You
There you
can't join us,
go.
Mark. You weren't invited yet. Sorry. You don't get
It's funny
to.
though, when you talk to the lay person, like someone is like, "Wow, Mark, you know a lot about birds." But then if I talk to actual bird nerds, they're like, "You're like a D student," you
Yeah,
know?
totally.
Yeah.
We look
So
like A students to the general audience, but like the second you talk to someone who knows what they're doing, we know nothing.
nothing.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask a big closing question.
Oh,
And
okay. I'll let you have it, Mark. Go for it.
thank you.
A big one.
So people look at someone like you, and we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of you have this really cool career and you're doing what you want to do. And people would be like, man, I want to do that. And then they immediately have that, but I can't. I got to do this, or this. I need to, be at home or whatever the excuse. People are good at making excuses. What do you say to those folks that maybe they're in school now, or maybe they're looking for a mid-career change? How do you get over those roadblocks?
Hmm. Honestly, I think there's a lot of fear involved. Like, even though everything I've done has been really cool, I was terrified, like at the start of every single thing. Like, I remember when I first flew to that Africa conservation job, I was freaking out. I was like, where am I going? What am I doing? Same thing with the boat, same thing with like all these projects, same thing when I first took on an assignment with National Geographic working on their expedition. I like flew to Alaska and just like just had no idea what I was getting myself into. So a big part of it is honestly being scared of that unknown, but not letting that stop you from saying yes and not letting that prevent you from doing it. And I think that to answer like the directness of your question, which is like, well, how do people do it, is to just like jump those hurdles of what you're afraid of and actually, because anyone can change a career and anyone can do a different job, but it's always like, I'm scared. Am I going to make money, or am I going to be good at it, or am I not going to know what I'm doing? And those fears are really what's holding people back. Like that's the only limiting factor. Like we're all fully capable of doing these things and switching careers and doing all that other stuff. But it's really a matter of just like overcoming that sort of dialogue in your head that says like it's scary, and jumping out of your comfort zone.
No, I completely agree. And I think that's something we all have in common on this call is that we've all switched careers in that kind of weird way where I went from a public affairs firm in Los Angeles to a town of 500 people just because I really did not want to be there anymore. And Mark left his very lucrative career in finance to pursue photography and animal advocacy. And I think it's all of those little tiny steps where you're like, I just have to do it anyway. Even though I'm afraid, I have to do it anyway because it's something I'm passionate about. And it's so cool to hear you say that to folks that are thinking about getting into this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, hopefully maybe this has inspired one of our listeners and it's sinking in and saying I can do this. And for those that don't want to make a career change but want to do that dream trip that they just have always made excuses for, maybe we can get them to get to that destination. But we couldn't be more appreciative. I know that there's been a lack of poop talk on the Wildlife Wire, so we are thankful for that, and just hearing some really cool experiences from you. So thank you so much, Max. And last question: where do people find you on the internet?
Yeah, Max Wilderness. That's my Instagram and my website. So those are probably the best places.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Max.
This has been an episode of the Wildlife Wire with me, Mark Searles, and my co-host, Samantha Miller. Thank you for listening.